Right now, we'd like to bring on a young man who believes in doing things his own way. And based on the way he kind of get next to all of the folks who've seen him work, his way has got to be pretty hip. So let's lay some noise.
Listen on me, boy.
2000 and beyond.
Fight for this so-called democracy. But when they get back down to
Fellow Bucks fans, welcome back. It's been a rough one. It's been a rough 24 hours at this stage. Week 9 is past. Tampa Bay has taken one of the worst beatings we've seen in probably the last four years. 35 point deficit. 38-3 final score versus the team from New Orleans, biggest divisional rival for most of us fans, and it was one of the worst showings in the history of Bucks football. We thought some of these days were behind us. We saw a few of these back in the Schiano days, saw one or two of them in the Dirk Cutter days. They were rampant in the Lovie Smith days. And he famously once said, we've got to wear this scar. We're going to have to wear whatever we call this. We got to give it a name. Whatever it is, whatever just happened, Sunday night primetime football, it's going to stick with the Bucks for longer than Bruce Arians and some of the other guys want to imagine. It's going to go past Wednesday. It's going to linger for a while. Tonight, I'm joined once again with the play reaction, Mr. Corey Draper. If you guys haven't, again, if you didn't check out the last podcast leading up to the game Sunday, he joined me. We talked about some of the issues, tried to get some insight as to what was going on then. Some of those things came into fruition this past Sunday night. Once again, welcome Corey Draper, man. Thank you.
Thanks for having me back. I agreed to this before the game happened. And that's like, oh man, now I can't do what I usually do after my YouTube retirement, which is just shut everything off for a week. Gotta keep this in my mind, in my brain. You know, actually what I try to do is I've really tried hard to implement it over the last season or two, is have the same mentality that the players and coaches claim to have, which is take Monday, take 24 hours, let it, piss you off, and let it run through its course, but then wake up on Tuesday and on to the next week. So We'll see how that goes when I wake up tomorrow.
How was definitely going for you?
I'm definitely processing through it. I mean, you're talking about wearing scars. I don't know, 45 years of Bucks football. I don't know if we have any skin left that's not covered in scars at this point. So,
yeah, I think I'm going to name this one scar tissue, to be honest with you. That's going to be the track. That's going to be the track for this one.
You mentioned all the blowouts. I was at the Falcons blowout on Thursday Night Football a few years ago.
Ooh, that was ugly. 56 to
Josh McCown year and Mike Glennon. I think it was Mike Glennon. But anyway, yeah, it was rough. And I can't tell if I can't decide whether or not that one was worse than this one. And I think ultimately, and obviously it's recency bias a little bit, and it also matters how we respond to it. But right now, this one seems to feel worse just simply because you would think that, I thought that with Tom Brady, he doesn't get blown out like that. That doesn't happen. And so I least expected it this year. And then they just find a way.
Yeah, man. It was ugly. I've seen my share of blowouts as well. I know on the last podcast you're talking about my being a season pass holder, since 2006. So I saw that Tennessee murder, the first game of Jameis Winston, first pass, pick six after all the hype, all the hoopla. We saw that. Then also that Baltimore game. I didn't think anything could get past that Baltimore game.
Ugh, yeah.
The Atlanta game was one thing. It was on the road. It was like, oh, man. But every single thing that could have gone wrong in that Baltimore game was like, I think it was 46 to something, 46 to 7 maybe? I'm not even sure.
I don't remember. But I tried to put it out of my mind. I remember it just being a horrible day.
Every single thing that could have gone wrong actually went wrong in that game. And this game, again, this was no different. And I'm like you, as much as we even talked about, preparing ourselves and seeing what was going on prior to the game, other games leading up to Sunday night, talking about some of the tendencies, some of the bad habits that were going on, some of the questionable play calls and schemes and things that we didn't understand. Just about every single one of those things came to pass on Sunday night. And again, with you, it was because of the expectations. Like, we didn't expect to see a team, this team with all this talent get blown out the way that it did. Like, it honest to goodness, as much as I, prepared myself, for best and worst case scenarios, this one was one of the ones that didn't even cross my mind that it would be so bad.
Well, it wasn't egregious turnovers and it wasn't penalties. I mean, there were some in this game for sure, but that's not why we got blown out. It was just we got dominated, and there's just no way around it. Like, at least with the Bears game, it's like, officiating was shaky. We beat ourselves. That's something you can correct. But this is like, oh, well, it leaves you wondering what you really have.
Yeah, it does. And again, we kind of brought some of these things up before the game. Let's start with the offense. And let's start with the offense. Myself, personally, unfortunately, we've seen this team, this offense, just start as if they had all day, as if they had a buoy somewhere that they could, it's the defense that they can, and it's good that they can rely on the defense. But it seemed as if they feel they can turn it on whenever they want to. That's not been the case in any of the games this year. This game was no different. It almost want to leave you speechless. Like, you almost don't want to say much about it. Like, but it's so. It was just so hard to watch from the first snap of the game, and everybody. It was just so disappointing, to be honest with you. I have to pinpoint everything to my quarterback. It was so disappointing to see my quarterback basically seem as he played as bad as the former starting quarterback. Mm-hmm. I didn't think he should have gotten as rattled as it seemed he did. The very first pass, Tristan Wirfs, he was blocking Cameron Jordan. Cameron Jordan should have drawn a flag because he hit Brady in the face on the way to the incomplete pass. From that point on, it seemed as if Brady was just hell-bent on pushing that ball downfield.
Yep.
Is that what you saw? Did you see something slightly different throughout the game, or what were you looking at?
I had the exact same feeling. It was quarterback play I was used to for the previous 5 years, not this year. It was forcing it to Mike Evans, when you're getting pressured kind of plays that we don't expect from this quarterback, and suddenly, replace Mike Evans with Antonio Brown. And it's almost like Brady's trying to prove that it was worth bringing him on. And even though the coaches deny it, we all know Brady vouched for him. Mm-hmm. But it's more than that. It's, when you're, like you said, he got so rattled, and so early too. It seemed like he was rattled from the first drive, the first 3 plays. He was not comfortable, and chucking it up. I mean, that interception that he just threw a prayer, it was baffling. You don't expect that from him. And he did not have a good game. And you could say offensive line, they didn't have a great game either, missing Alley. But even still, there were plenty of plays where he had plenty of time to rear back and find somebody, and he didn't. And it's just not what we've seen at all this year from him.
Yeah, and I've been going back and forth with some cats on social media on every platform that I can think of, either all the major platforms. And and funny enough, but it was predictable. We have a lot of fans who, New England transplants fans, expats, whatever you want to call them, and they were within right to express their opinions like every other fan, whatever they come from, whatever, whoever they are. But what it all came down to, it felt exactly like it felt the last 5 years when other fans from FSU and other Jameis Winston fans came around. He couldn't have done wrong. Everything, It had to have been someone else. There's no way somebody was open if he didn't throw it and hit him. And I looked at the all 22 for like about, I think the first 3 drives. And all 22 just came out today, probably like an hour before this recording. So I looked at those. And there were guys open. And again, it just looked like he was pushing the ball downfield. And I understand that it's a different read. It's a different process, the way these plays go according to Bruce Arians' plans and so forth. Allegedly, again, this is just what I understand. Allegedly, the reads go from deep to shallow. That's basically where you go in the reads, and that's kind of the notion a lot of the fans have been pushing and kind of explaining to each other and to anybody who speaks negatively about Tom Brady. Even in that sense, if it goes deep to shallow, there's a finite amount of time that you can be looking deep before you just have to go shallow, whatever it is, and throw the ball away. Mm-hmm. Regardless of the read process, or the read progress, you have to make the read faster. You have to make better decisions.
Well, and that's what was so confusing is Brady is known for taking that dump off pass. I mean, that's what James White made a living off of that in New England, of just, Brady just, if it's not there, he throws it away. If he's not there, he gets rid of the ball. That's what I was sold this offseason. Of like, this is not going to hold. I'm not going to hold it on, try to make a play and throw up a prayer kind of quarterback. This is, if the read's not there, he's not going to throw it. That is not what I saw. And with the benefit of the doubt, people are giving Brady, as they should, and he deserved it, right?
He does. He's earned
it. People's favorite whipping boy is Byron Leftwich right now, which, we talked a little bit about on the last podcast. I think he does deserve some blame as well as, I mean, you say if it centers towards the quarterback. For me, it goes to the coaching, specifically Byron and Bruce. I think it all begins and ends with him, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, which we maybe can talk about a little later after we talk about the defense. But I talked about in the last time we talked that, as good as our defense is, Breeze was built to exploit our defense. Like that's just something I knew, and that was something I was concerned about. So I said, I think it's going to be a high scoring game and we have to go toe to toe with Breeze. I expected this offense to do that. I expected Brady to match Breeze toe to toe and it'd be a close game. So the defense giving up as many points as they did at the end of the game is something I kind of expected. It's a little bit more than I expected, but there were drives where, the Saints scored that first touchdown. We went 3 and out. Saints scored their first touchdown, and we went 3 and out, and then they drove the field again and fumbled. Yeah. And the defense got the ball back, and we had a chance to even the score and change the tone of that game, and we went 3 and out again.
3 and out. Yep.
So when you're telling the story of the game, I think the first blame goes on the offense, which, goes to Tom Brady. He takes his share. The offensive line takes their share. But Byron and his play calling was just baffling.
Indeed. And again, we talked about that before the game, like you said, yeah. And again, it's something about when you already have something in your mind, and I try to stay away from bias. One of the reasons why I appreciate you and your work and actually seeing you in social media and everything else, you tend to ask questions as well and to make sure that you're not sticking to your own bias.
Right.
But when you look at something like that, you're like, oh man, it's almost like, you walk outside, I'm like, man, I hope I don't get hit by a rock. I hope I don't get, a bird doesn't pee on me or something. And all of a sudden a bird pees and you be like, oh, I knew it. I knew it. And then it just makes you feel much worse.
Yeah.
Again, something that can happen at any time, but because you have it in your mind that it could happen, and then it does, it just makes you feel so much worse. And I believe that's what a lot of us saw with Byron Leftwich.
Well, you said receivers were open. Imagine Brady hitting those receivers. And then, what story are we telling about Byron's play calling? I mean, people were – now, I'll say this. We were 6-2 and still criticizing Byron's play calling. So that is something that didn't just magically appear in this game when we lost. But at the same time, I think it's the whole, like, exactly what you're talking about. It's the Donovan Smith thing when he misses a block. It's one of those things where – if that idea is in your mind and something confirms that idea, then you must have been right about all your previous thoughts and expectations there.
Right.
So Byron takes blame, but obviously there's going to be that like overreaction towards him specifically that he probably doesn't deserve.
Yeah.
So,
and again, every time I mention Byron Leftwich, I have to tie it in with Bruce Arians because again, it feels like he's a guy who it's his system. He brought in Byron. If I got to give him credit for bringing in the guru of defense on, as Todd Bowles, then he's more than 100% responsible for the actions of Byron Leftwich. Again, let's speaking about the offense. One of the things that I looked at from the previous game, the Week 1 contest, was the lack of throwing the shorter passes and a lack of getting the linebackers outside of the box and making them cover. We didn't see a lot of passes thrown to the tight ends. In fact, I don't remember a tight end getting targeted outside of Gronkowski. Like
I think Brait might have had a target at one point, but yeah.
Did he get a target? I don't remember. I do not remember. And it's no matter
late in the game.
Was it late in the game? It was just the tactics that were put in play just didn't make sense. Like, we got away from the run so early.
Yeah. Which is funny because everybody's complaint was that we ran too much. And then we went to the other side and now we didn't run enough. But, I would have to look at maybe you can tell me just looking at the game film over those first 2 to 3 drives when we're down 14-0 or 7-0. Mm-hmm. It seemed like we passed a lot, but then once it gets to 21-0 and 28-0, you kind of understand them not running a whole lot. And Bruce explained in his press conference for whether it's a good idea or not. What they did is they went to hurry up. Just and quick passing just to see if they could get a rhythm going. And that didn't even work. So, no, you shouldn't end the game only running 4 times. But then again, when you're losing 38-3, you're just not going to run very much.
Yeah, the one thing I say about that, and that's something that I've seen so much, like when you get down 38 to 31 to such, like the game didn't just go from 7 to 31. There was a whole progression in which the Bucs could have been running the ball.
Yeah.
Going to the third drive, just going to the third Bucs drive, it was 1 run and 2 passes, and then it was a punt. By the time we got to the second quarter, it was basically, at that point, it was all passes. It was the second quarter started out with 3 passes, and it was it. Like everything from the second quarter on was basically a pass. And the score wasn't that far to reach.
Yeah.
It wasn't. Like it was just completely abandoned ship, and it was a bad game plan. It seems like whatever the game plan might have been, it just seemed like it was bad. There was no execution of any kind of real game plan. It was just kind of, if we don't go deep, then we don't get it. That's just so asinine, man. Yeah, I mean, it was one of the poorest performances, maybe the most embarrassing performance. Just again, combining the expectations, combining all the things that we had kind of been seeing creep up on this offense for the past several weeks, and then watching it come into fruition. That may have been the worst loss I've personally watched.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to completely bail out the defense. I do think I blame the offense more. Just in my gut feeling in my brain without watching film or anything, just because when you come out that flat on offense, suddenly the defense is on the field for so long. And that's partially the defense's fault for not getting the stops. But, and if you want to, we can transition to defense talk there. But, I mean, there's the whole – it seemed like it was bad game planning on offense and defense. I mean, shoot, Bradley Pinion couldn't even punt last night. I mean, everybody was just off. So I don't want to harp too much on one unit, but at the same time, if I were to rank the blame, so to speak, I would put it on the offense first. I don't know. Do you feel that way?
100%. And again, like I mentioned before, I try to watch out for my own biases and so forth, but I've always looked and saw or paid attention to what the defense was doing in correlation to what the offense is doing. If the offense scores and then the defense comes out and give up a score, then I'm like, okay, the defense, they got to do better. They got to keep, they got to keep things moving. They got to, keep that momentum going. But when the defense comes out, and they get a stop, be it a fumble, turnover, or they force a punt, the offense has to come back and answer. There's just nothing to me that compares to an offense coming out on the first. Basically, every single drive was a failure. Every single drive was a punt, an interception, turnover on downs. Every single one. And 4 straight 3-and-outs. There's nothing I believe a defense can do to help that kind of a performance.
Well, and it's an ebb and flow kind of thing, right? I mean, and again, we can talk about the defense and their game plan in a second, but when your defense is struggling, so let's say for the first 2 drives and New Orleans is suddenly up 14-0, and you give the defense a breather and you have a long drive and you bring it to 14-7, there's something that does something mentally probably for those players and also physically that can help them adjust a little quicker and think through some things, like give them, but they didn't have any time to think. It was 3-and-out. It's like, okay, they scored a touchdown. Let's sit down on the bench. Let's look at some plays. Oh, hey, it's 3-and-out. They're punting. Let's get our helmets back on. And it was just, and if we were to say the Saints kept scoring like they did, but we kept scoring, the adjustments we made at halftime would have worked. I mean, they only scored, 10 more points the rest of the game?
No, it was 31-0 going into halftime.
Okay.
So they scored 7
one touchdown.
Was that?
Yeah, so they had the 1 touchdown at the second half, right?
Yes.
So, which of course, that changes, based on, okay, they weren't really trying towards the end, they had backups in and all that stuff. But my point is that if that's a close game at halftime, this is a different game. And the reason it wasn't a close game was because the defense was giving up scores, but the offense wasn't scoring and not helping out the defense at all. So It might be a chicken or the egg thing, but and again, I don't want to bail out the defense too much because the game plan going in was god awful, and it scares me honestly that they thought that they could go in and only rush 4 based on what we've seen so far this year. They could go only rush 4 against Breeze, who was a quick passer, and think they could get home to him and cover in zone. Well, we haven't done that this year.
No, and before I go on and finish, and start with the defense,
sure.
I want to go back and ask. Ask you a question here about what you felt. Again, we kind of mentioned a little bit with the Antonio Brown and the targets that were being distributed and so forth. Antonio Brown got more targets, not allegedly, but truthfully, he got more targets than Scotty. He got more targets than Scotty Miller. Mm-hmm. Do you think, one game, it's a narrative that kind of been built up and a notion that's kind of been planted in the minds of some fans. You think he was looking too much to make those big plays and to make to prove that he has an arm still and to try to be that guy for some reason?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's to prove he has an arm or what. It's hard to project emotions, really. I don't know why we featured Antonio, if that came from coaching or if it came from Brady. I know that before the game, they said they wanted to get Brown, around 30 snaps or whatever it was. I can't remember what the number was. So they said they were going to try to play him a lot. But to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense either when he's had just a handful of practices and he hasn't.
2 practices.
Yeah, 2 practices to get on the same page with Brady, and they just assumed that they would have the chemistry that Gronk and Brady had when they only played one other game together. So, and one of the interceptions was their miscommunication on the route. So, that doesn't make sense to me. Why is this suddenly Madden and we're throwing in Antonio Brown and we think he's going to have 180 yards and 2 touchdowns? That doesn't compute. And maybe maybe the coach or maybe Brady or maybe a combination of both of them had too much confidence in Brady to figure it out and get the ball to whoever needs to get the ball, when that's just not realism.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I'll get ready to transition with this. And then I'm going to end up talking about this on a later podcast, possibly tomorrow. But these narratives and these notions that have been floating around about Tom Brady and his importance and Bruce Arians and his importance to their success, I think those have to come to a head. Like eventually people have to come and actually kill one of those narratives that they've been going through their mind. Either Tom Brady is that guy that can make something out of nothing. Like, a lot of people have been saying he's been doing in New England his entire time he's been there. You have to either give up that narrative or give up the one that says that he needs Antonio Brown, some all-world wide receiver who probably shouldn't even be allowed in the NFL. He needed that guy to come in. If you think Tom Brady is that guy that did all that stuff in New Orleans, despite what was around him, making something out of nothing, then there's no way you want to discount the notion that he does not have the power. He is not enabled enough to change the reads, the play, or the progress of which these plays that are going down, and especially in the last few weeks. Tom Brady is either making these plays himself, he's making these calls, he's making bad decisions, or he's a puppet that's just doing what Bruce Arians says he wants to do. Or he's just doing what Bruce Arians tells him to do. One of those things is going on, and people want to go from, play to play and week to week. Like something's awry there. Tom Brady is either that guy that's making something out of nothing, or he's that guy who and he's that guy who's, calling his own plays and calling his own shots, or he's just, whoever. He didn't come to Tampa to be whoever. Like, nobody expected him to be, just some random quarterback. His 20 years of experience should have guided him a hell of a lot better than it's been the last couple of weeks. He's not the offense, and it shouldn't go on any one quarterback to be the offense. But his role in these losses and his performances in some of these games have been subpar, and we've all seen him play better.
I do wonder if this is a knee-jerk. I mean, just where we've ended up now, where we have Gronk, we have Brown, we have Fournette. I wonder if this is just a knee-jerk reaction, like a pendulum swinging the other way, to just how upset he was in New England for them not giving him weapons. Mm-hmm. That part of convincing him to come to Tampa is, we'll give you whatever you think you want, whatever you need. And so that's why we have those guys. But now that's overcomplicating things. I feel like suddenly we've added way too many cooks to the kitchen, and suddenly we have this Madden super team, but we don't need it. We got spooked by the receivers getting hurt and having a bad game. But like you said, if Tom Brady's who a lot of people say he is, he doesn't need. All he needs is Mike Evans, honestly, if he's that guy. That 1-star receiver, and having Evans and Chris Godwin definitely should be enough for him. But we keep adding pieces, and suddenly he's forcing balls to the brand new receiver without trusting the other guys who are coming open. It's overcomplicated, and I'm kind of concerned now. Yeah,
and again, anybody who's listening to this, I thank you again for listening. Don't turn it off just yet because we, critiquing the quarterback. That's, or you can, it won't matter. But the deal is this, man. Tom Brady will go down no matter what happens the rest of this year, no matter what happens in his time in Tampa, as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. There's no doubt about that whole deal there. But these things that we're bringing up tonight, this ain't the first time around. you can check out some of the writings I've done. You can check out some of the commentary around the internet. People have been looking and saying, obviously he's an imperfect quarterback. He's an imperfect person like anybody else. But some of these things that are happening, some of these issues going on now between him and Bruce Arians, somebody who I've questioned again since last year, these things are now coming to a head. There was a lot of people who told you that, hey, don't worry about it. It's a win. Don't worry about it. The team's finally getting themselves together, this and that. Nah. The offense was never in a position. They were never a cohesive unit enough to add a volatile element like an Antonio Brown or anyone else, to be honest with you. Yeah. But it happened. But there's a reason why coaches have to be really good coaches and manage people. There's a reason why Bill Belichick is who he is in New England. That's why he had an iron fist, and that's why he didn't give players what they wanted, and they didn't sign people the way a lot of people wanted. There's the same reason why Phil Jackson could manage a personality like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and all these other guys. There's a reason why Steve Kerr can do that with a bunch of star players. Not everybody can do it. That you have to put your foot down. You have to be a coach. You have to be a general manager, and you have to put the players in a position for them to just be players. I don't remember a good player that went on to be a general manager, especially at the same damn time. Michael Jordan, one of the greatest athletes ever, greatest player in his sport. He ain't worth a damn as a GM. John Elway has been spending the last.
He can't find a quarterback,
and I tell you why. He's trying to model a quarterback the exact same way his career went.
Right.
He wasn't worth a damn for the first 8-9 years of his career. All he did was keep things afloat with a top 5 defense for most of his career, and all he had to do was just hold on. Around year 8, year 9, he finally took off in his last few years of his career, and he became that Hall of Fame guy that we know and love now. But he was never that superstar guy. I'm sorry, he didn't make it to being that superstar guy until 8-9 years down the line. You can't do that in today's NFL, and that's exactly why he's been doing the exact same thing. He's been trying to find a player who can model his career. Doesn't happen. And again, I want to clear something up. Again, we are not saying that Tom Brady has his hands on everything. We don't know it. That's kind of the room. That's kind of, some of the stuff that's going around. You've seen some of the results of all the things that he's wanted. He wanted Gronkowski. He somehow told the coach who told you and me, fellow Bucs fans, that there was no way a total diva like Antonio Brown was going to be in Tampa. Chris Godwin burped, and it was enough of an injury for Bruce Arians to be like, well, we got to get somebody in it. No, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's a crazy deal. But that we'll stick with that on the offensive side. It was a crazy game. Again, we can't blame it all on one side of the ball, one player. That's never been the case. But above everything else, for me, everything else that I looked at in that game, I wasn't as disappointed as anything as much as I was my quarterback. It was just hard to watch. On the defensive side of the ball, though, Todd Bowles, who has been my MVP the entire year, he did what everybody feared would happen, or what everybody didn't understand, including myself. We didn't understand his playing a zone in anybody, against anyone, but especially against Drew Brees. It was in week 1 that he actually took a hold of the defense and completely switched everything up and almost pulled out the win, or should have pulled out the win against the Saints in week 1 when he changed his philosophy, or to change the way that he played the Saints last year, in which he did play the exact same kind of zone we just saw Sunday night. He switched that and started playing more man, and he had Carlton Davis shadow Michael Thomas all night long and shut him down. For some reason, Sunday night, he completely went against the grain there. I don't know an explanation for it. What were your feelings watching that, man?
I mean, same as everybody else's. I just bitterness, frustration. For me, it's a lack of adjustment. I would expect an adjustment as immediately as possible. I mean, not waiting until halftime to adjust, but actually, I mean, honestly, and Trevor Sikkema said this, basically, if they were going in with that game plan, they lost the game before it was, even played. It's hard for me to reconcile the fact that, hey, when schmoes like you and me who know a margin of football, the amount of football that Todd Bowles does, can sit here and say, hey, Jamel Dean, liability in the zone, Murphy Bunting, liability in the zone, Devin White, liability in the zone, to say, hey, you know what, against one of the best quarterbacks in the league, let's play zone against him and think that that's going to go well. On top of the fact that we have not been able to get pressure rushing only for, I don't even know if at all this year. I mean, again, I don't review tape or anything, but even with Vea, I don't know if we've gotten consistent pressure only rushing 4 guys.
We have. When Vea was in there, we did get pressure. Even without Vea, the last game, and even in this game, we ended up getting pressure in there, but it was nothing consistent. Sunday night, there was nothing consistent. But without Vea, there has been sometimes we've been able to get in there with the additional, not with the blitz, but we've been able to get in there with Shaq Barrett. Shaq Barrett put some pressure on the young fella, Daniel, in New York. So, I mean, it's happened, but it's definitely not consistent. It's not something you can build on. And again, I remember telling you about, just having those four guys down and having Pierre Paul and having Shaq Barrett. They're standing up rushing. Yep. But then when you got the offense, they had more than a few times, they had additional tight ends who were in there blocking. It was rough getting back there, man. Yeah. Yeah. And again, if it's stuff that we're seeing, I mean, I don't see how those coaches can look at the tape as much as they do and say, hey, this is a good game plan, knowing that this is not the strength of their defense. Like we're not going to put our strength versus their strength. We're going to go with something we're kind of shaky at and think that that's going to be a good game plan. I think that's just the most frustrating part. Again, if the offense did their job, we're, probably not as disappointed. But going into the game with that game plan, and then also being so slow to adjust and realize what's not working, was the most frustrating part for me. Now, you're not alone in thinking that, he waited and that Todd Bowles waited until halftime to switch up the tactics there. He actually did it on the second drive in the second quarter. Okay. In the second drive, I believe, of the Saints, they went more man. They went man on that drive, and when they got the fumble, they were still in zone. They were still in the first quarter, but he switched it up in that second drive of the Saints in the second quarter. But again, it was just they just couldn't get any pressure up there with those 4, and yeah. How much did they blitz on that? Do you remember? I don't remember how much they blitzed on that when they went man. I do not remember. I have to go back and take a look at it. Because that's what I'm interested in seeing. I mean, once all the people review the tape over the next day or two, is how often did we? Because we're known as a blitzing team. Yeah. And my memory stuck on the ones where we're only rushing 4 people, because that's the one that got the emotional reaction out of me. Right. For all I know, we still probably blitzed a lot, but I don't remember a lot. So I'm interested in knowing how much we did. I have to go back and check it again right before this recording, maybe like an hour or so before they brought the All 22 coaches film was released. So I hadn't gotten a chance to take a look at it. I've also not been able to look up statistically what was listed as a blitz and what wasn't. But It was again, you and I talked about this again, and I keep bringing up what we talked about before the game, and something I said was that Todd Bowles mixes that scheme up. He mixes up the zone and the blitz to get people comfortable, and then he switches things up. Yeah. And I was just like, maybe he did that to start the game, to think to get New Orleans comfortable and to think that they switched up their tactic completely. However it went down, it played out horribly. He played out horribly. And to your point again, if the Bucks offense makes something out of that fumble, if they score on that turnover, if they score on any of the stops that the Bucks did make, which weren't a whole lot, it's a completely different story we're talking about.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking we might be on the verge of a Tom Brady quarterback when we drove the field in the second half and couldn't score from the 1 yard line. I mean, imagine if we had gotten a touchdown there. I mean, what kind of spark could have happened? But anyway, I don't want to bring it back to the offense. I just remembered it.
Dude, it was three straight. I think it was three straight passes. No, I think Ronald Jones maybe got one run, and then it was pass. What the?
And it wasn't just, and that was another thing that upset me is we threw 2 fades on that, and fades are known as low percentage plays, right? I mean, that's when you call a fade on 4th down, that's just
you
how can you expect that to succeed? I just, even with Mike Evans, but knowing Evans has been dominated by Lattimore, do you really think that that's the right play to go to when you have to score or it's nothing there?
Oh man.
Anyway,
I don't get why. Again, I don't get why between Ronald Jones and Fournette, I don't get why we didn't just run it. Well, at
we keep throwing screen passes to them when they can't shed tackles. Anyway, sorry. That's
a Fournette deal, and that's something else I've been meaning to. I've actually been writing on that. I've been writing on that. All the Fournette versus Ronald Jones stuff. Fournette, as much as I love Fournette, and I was a huge Fournette fan from his SEC and LSU days, he can't do what Ronald Jones does. He just don't. He has to get past. He has to get to and beyond the line of scrimmage before he becomes that guy.
I mean, I remember seeing Rojo getting tackled in the open field yesterday too on a screen. So I mean, he's not. His problem is still he can't catch, but when he does, sometimes he still can't shed a tackle. So
for the most part, he doesn't get hit. He doesn't get stopped by the first guy for the most part, be it in an open field with a tackler, whether it's a screen or whether it's a pass or the run.
I definitely agree. He's more elusive than Fournette. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Fournette always gets hit.
Here's the deal, and again, I know we're straying away from the defense, but Fournette straight up goes Michael Pittman. He goes looking for contact. Yeah. He's been trying to run people over. I'm like, yo, time out, man. You can't just do that. You can't do that. I remember in the game last week, we had a lot of fans who were just losing their minds about his being marked down on, I believe it was a 3rd and 2, saying that he got the first down. I'm like, nah, man. He tried to run a guy over. He had like 8 yards to the right. He could have run around, but he kept trying to run a guy over. But God bless him, man. I love him. I'm a Fournette fan, but yeah, I don't get why we didn't give him the ball on that 1 yard line. I would have just run him the entire time.
Yeah,
would have done it. But okay, in the defense, again, going back, and I'll be writing about this tomorrow. I told anybody who would listen, last season, this season, before the game, preseason, I was trying to tell cats, my dude, one of my favorite people to listen to, one of my favorite players to watch on the field, Devin White, again, had another iffy game. Everything that I mentioned, he was iffy and shaky with. His tackling pursuits, his playing hesitant, all of these things came into play, and he looked like one of the more lost guys on the field last night, man. It was one of those things. I'm like, oh man. And I remember writing, I was like, yo, he doesn't have back-to-back bad games, but so far he hasn't. So it may not be an issue, but it's something to pay attention to. Yeah. Sure enough. Sure enough.
Yeah, not much more to say on that one. I mean, it's just I'm hopeful that he will get better at it, but the coaches need to put him in the places where he can succeed the most, and obviously he can't never drop back in coverage, but I don't know. I hope he can get better at it, and I hope the coaches can recognize that it's not his strength and try to scheme around it, and send him more. or shadow him more on the running back or whoever he needs to shadow. But dropping him back, man, it makes me wince. Those over the middle passes to tall tight ends.
Yeah,
Just can't keep up.
And to be fair, for a lot of cats who paid attention to him and kind of tracked his targets and what percentage was completed on him last night, I believe it turned out to be 11 of 11. But again, I just want to be mindful that the Bucs were playing zone, and because it's listed him as a target, it might have been his zone, but those targets don't depict whether or not he was. He wasn't playing man to man, so every target that was completed in his zone, in his area, just means he was the closest one to the ball. So I defend him just a little bit on that. But a lot of his bad habits showed up in Sunday night's game in that loss to New Orleans. It was ugly. The whole thing was ugly, man. Whole thing was ugly.
You know what? On to Carolina.
On to Carolina is what they say. I'm gonna be talking about this. I'm not gonna lie. I'll be talking about this one for the next 3-4 days, man. Now, I'm not lingering over it. I'm not upset about it. Like I said, if you pay attention to what's been going on and how the team has been trending, especially, just trending on tendencies and so forth, there's no way you don't come out shocked how the team in as a whole played.
Yeah, but
it's not shocking to see the team have a bad game based on how it's been playing recently leading up to this game. So that's one thing I encourage fellow Bucs fans to pay attention to. If you continue to pay attention to what's going on around the league as well as with the Bucs, and pay attention to how the Bucs actually play, you won't get into some of these lulls and some of these crazy responses and foolishness that a lot of Bucs fans and media also get involved in. These say anything types who will just say and do anything to get attention and try to prove themselves right, to get to fulfill their bias and all this other stuff. Last night, Bruce Arians deserved to be fired. Todd Bowles deserved to be fired. Donovan Smith should have been left. He shouldn't have been able to walk out of the locker room with a uniform coming back the next day. Like, every single person needed to be fired, according to some of these overreactions from a lot of Bucs fans and some media. And just pay attention, pay close attention to what's going on in some of these tendencies, and realize that Tom Brady isn't in New Orleans. I'm sorry, he isn't in New England anymore. Todd Bowles is imperfect. We don't understand his defense because none of us are in it, and we're all fans just kind of watching and trying to enjoy these games. But these guys who are out there playing, they're playing their hearts out. For better or worse, they're doing their best for the most part. Nobody's out there being lazy. Nobody's out there, just out there collecting a paycheck. A lot of these guys are trying hard, and sometimes they fail. Last night against the New Orleans Saints, they failed, and they failed hard. That's still our team. Most of us still love them. Some of y'all are just followers, and you probably already cut off the podcast at this point, which we don't really care about.
Well, it's all a matter of how they respond.
Indeed. Yeah. So going forward, you're a little bit shaky, a little bit worried. Yeah. What is the shakiest or most worrisome coming out of Sunday's loss?
Well, my big concern is that, and I brought it to you in the last podcast about the whole creative play caller thing, which, it's, Sean Payton is making me, it's that confirmation bias. I still am concerned about facing teams like the Rams and the Chiefs. That I don't know if our offense is creative enough to keep up with those creative offenses. Our defense is good enough to keep us in games, but when it comes down to it, apart from the last game notwithstanding, but when it comes to going toe to toe with a high-powered offense or a creative offense, for that matter, I still have yet to see us adapt on offense and be creative on offense. And if our offensive game plan isn't going well, then it continues to not go well, and that's concerning to me. So, even in games like the Giants game where we come back and win, it doesn't seem like we changed anything. It's just that the quarterback started to connect more. I know that's a wild accusation from somebody who didn't watch any film, but that's the feeling I get. So that's the concern I have. It's so hard because you don't want to ride the wave of, hey, we just beat a really good team in Green Bay. We're the best team. We can go toe to toe with anyone. And then, oh, we just almost lost to the Giants and got our butts handed to us by the Saints. We're going to be a 7-9 team. You don't want to go that way either. So, my concern is creativity on offense. My hope is that, hey, we still have Tom Brady. His mental fortitude is as good as anybody at that position. If we had our previous quarterbacks, plural, in any history that I remember, I would be a lot more concerned that we would be able to dig ourselves out of this. But I think that if we ever have a shot, it's with Tom Brady. And I do think that we have a great shot against the Panthers. We are a better team than they are, which obviously the last couple of weeks, it's like, oh, that may not matter, but we are a better team than they are. And I think this can be a get right game for us. And let's just hope we're done with the humbling matchups. Let's hope we finally wake up and stop thinking we're all that coming off a win, and that we start to get creative, and that we earn these victories. And we have an opportunity to right the ship on Monday night against the Rams in 2 weeks, about the whole national spotlight narrative, the night game narrative that even Bruce Arians himself kind of propelled in his.
That was so disheartening to hear from a head coach, man.
For him to say, "Hey, we struggle at night games. We got to do something different." I mean, I'm not even sure I'm upset at him saying it. I mean, he's just confirming what we all believe anyway. So it's something we all know we need to take care of, and we have one last opportunity to right the ship before we're under the lights of playoffs. Still think we're going to make the playoffs, and if we do, we're in trouble if we don't right the ship on Monday night. So next 2 weeks are huge. Next 3 weeks are huge because the Chiefs game is in 3 weeks, and I'm hesitant. I'm concerned, but if we. I can't think of any other quarterback I'd rather have in this situation. Maybe a couple others, but that's the hope I'm gonna lay down.
Yeah, that's the hope is the playoffs, and we were all hoping we would be one of those dominating teams that didn't have to hope or wish anything bad happened to another team for us to make it. But here we are again, still at 6-3, still got a shot to make it, still got a shot to make things work, still got a shot to make things happen. Again, any given Sunday, anything can happen. For us, for the Saints, the Atlanta's kind of pretty much out of the picture at this stage. Carolina's still playing, and we got them coming up Sunday. So yeah, man, things are still panning out in our favor. But what you said was a mouthful, man, and I greatly appreciate it. I do want to leave fellow Bucs fans with this one thing that something I wrote in response to the game against the Giants. It kind of correlates to what Corey was just saying. One of the things that I had mentioned after all of the talk about being negative after a win and criticizing the team or even critiquing the team after a win when we thought everything could just go our way and the light switch can be turned on at any time. One of the things that I said was a win is a win, works in a playoff or a championship game. Until then, it's all a roadmap for how the next team is going to play us. Mm-hmm. What kind of visual are we leaving behind in these kind of games? And that was on the New York Giants game. Like, there's a distinct difference between being happy with the win and being happy with the performance.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what things kind of led up to, and it's basically ended with a crescendo like we saw on Sunday night, which was a total bust for a lot of fans who were paying attention. They kind of saw how it was trending. It just kind of imploded into what a lot of our worst fears was going to be. It was like, yeah, we were kind of headed this way, and it did. But again, like Corey says, there's a lot of time. There's a lot of hope still left. We still have one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, one of the greatest players of all time, still on the roster. But he can't play like one of the worst quarterbacks we've seen, which is basically what happened on Sunday night. We still have still got a lot of football to play. Still a lot of winning to do. But it has to be done on the field. The coaches have to get themselves together. We have a bye week, but if we don't get our things together by the bye week, that might literally be the bye week. That might be the end of it. But we're not looking for that far. We got our eyes on Carolina. Christian McCaffrey may not be in the game due to a shoulder injury. We'll see how everything kind of plays out throughout the week. There'll be more conversation about Sunday's debacle from me and a lot of other people around the Bucks fandom. I know Real Bucks Talk, they got their videos that's coming out sooner than later. I think they actually recorded some at this very moment, but that'll be out a little bit later. Also, in response to a lot of the foolishness and the reactions that we've seen throughout social media, over on the website, OutsideLeverage.com, you can check out some of the best and the worst social media responses to Sunday's loss. A lot of them are hilarious, and a lot of it will make you want to jump out of a window, but it's worth seeing. Y'all check it out if you can. Again, Corey Draper, the Play Reaction on Twitter. Again, one of the best follows, one of the more humble Bucks fans, and that's all we are, Bucks fans. We don't try to pretend to be anything else. Bucks fan, again, I greatly appreciate you, fellow Atlanta resident. Anything else, man, you want to do before we close out on this one?
Nothing else. Thanks for having me on, and I'm just ready to get a taste out of my mouth, ready to go to sleep, wake up, and it's a new week. It's game week. Let's go.
Indeed. Fellow Bucks fans, I thank you for listening. I am Robert Green. That is the Play Reaction, Mr. Corey Draper. We thank you. I'll be talking to you a little bit later this week. Till then, go Bucks.